super scared by games, which I think all of us have said we are, so we're in good company. Who are you, buddy? Hello.
Good evening. How are you? Good evening. It's Tuesday. Almost at the halfway point. Just a little bit more bullshit. Just like 18 hours and then you're in clear. Yes, so I've come to talk to you about what I call the science of nope. I decided to change the title because the initial one was just like a massive string of profanity, because that's generally how I react to horror games. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, my name is Christos Reid. Felnor, I'm an indie developer. I'm a producer. I write for and about games. I make all sorts of really weird shit, which is kind of why I like talking about stuff like this. And I'm also a massive coward. And I mean, like, not like on the small sense. I mean, like, as a kid, I got arachnophobia by watching the film Arachnophobia. I watched, when I was, I think, 14, I watched 28 Days Later for the first time. Couldn't go downstairs by myself at night for 2 weeks. Never managed to persuade my girlfriend at the time to go down with me. Yeah, so I thought I'd come to talk to you about jump scares, because they're pretty much my favourite thing in horror now, mainly because they are incredibly viral, hugely entertaining, and are actually really creative in the way that they're designed. So, as Helen spoke about earlier, Slender is a really, really good example of like your classic jump scare game. And the reason for that is essentially that you are given a seemingly mundane set of tasks to complete. So, for example, collecting 8 notes in an environment, which sounds boring as fuck if I'm honest, but what makes it really interesting is that you're an incredibly normal but devoid of all population environment, and there's something chasing you, not entirely sure what. I mean, quite frankly, it'd be more interesting to see what people's reactions are if they weren't aware of Slender Man, had absolutely no concept of what the game was about. Unfortunately, most people do. Into the Gloom is another really, really good example. It's quite a sort of lo-fi game. It's actually quite pretty. Ignore the really pixelated monster, it's just like the ugliest thing in the whole thing. But what's also interesting about it is, again, it's the same pattern. It's a huge, scary, badass monster that's chasing you through an environment that would otherwise be completely safe. And lastly is Lurking, which is genuinely probably one of, if you've not looked it up, the game name is Lurking. Again, it's generally one of the most creative and beautiful, well-designed short horror games I've ever seen. Because if there's one thing you can say for the horror genre in video games, it's actually that the average level of quality compared to other genres is extremely high, because there's such a high bar on environment, characterization, and mood. Like, you can't make something lo-fi and interpretive. There is no interpretive dance of horror video games. It has to be really good. And what strings all of these three together and what they have in common is that they're all villains. Eventually, I'm going to realise my remote doesn't work if I point that way. So yeah, basically, I'd like to talk to you, quite frankly, about why these bastards are terrifying. The first reason is that they are seemingly immortal, and that's the best thing about these villains in games, I find, is that you're generally left with the sense that there's nothing really you can do. The difference between horror, good horror, and other genres is that you're really given quite a lot of agency in other genres. For example, in point-and-click adventure games, you're already able to solve all the puzzles, pick up all the items, do all the things, and that's fantastic. And if you're playing through, say, for example, Halo 3, you're able to throw grenades, you're able to take out enemies. Anything that is even remotely a threat to you, you can fuck up with military force, and that's fantastic. But the thing about a lot of jump scare games and horror, especially indie horror, is that you're completely useless. A lot of the time you don't have any weaponry, a lot of the time you don't really have any clue about what you're fighting, and you're also not the most dangerous thing down there. The interesting thing about BioShock is that BioShock is an incredibly scary game until you realise one really important thing, which is you are the most dangerous thing in Rapture by fucking miles. that you could go up against 10 big daddies at once, totally spliced up, and you likely do pretty bloody well. And if you can, even if you can't, you come out of a back-to-life elevator just down the corridor. I mean, the Bioshock sort of approach to biology would have made watching Jackass a very different program. Interestingly, what's also fascinates me about them is that they're also really heavily into the concept of the uncanny, the sort of just slightly different. And it goes back to the Slender concept of, it's a dude, but he's unnaturally tall, which is fine. I have unnaturally tall friends. One of them is sat right over there. But the difference is that Mike's got a face.
Well, that doesn't make it any better.
Well, I should say you don't have a face.
Well, yeah. It's a face. You know, so much better than that.
So yeah, and also, yeah, to get back on track, one of the things that fascinates me about them, one of the things that makes them so terrifying is you've constantly got to navigate your way through an environment that you don't understand, that's poorly lit, that you've never seen before, whereas these guys have no obstacles whatsoever. Quite frequently, some of them don't even have any collision built in whatsoever. They can just go straight through walls and the floor. So they can just make a beeline for you, whereas you, as the player, constantly having to solve puzzles and open and close doors and run away really fucking slowly all the time. And yes, they are also able to appear at will, because who hasn't encountered the horror genre and then gone to bed and thought, there's like a 99.9 recurring % chance that there isn't a little dead girl in the corner where that coat is. But that 0.1% is why jump scare games work so well. So the reason that they make you jump is a combination of three things, I think. The first thing is misdirection. Misdirection is fucking beautiful. Years ago, I used to work as staff at live action roleplay events. And the first one I ever staffed, I dressed up as something a little like Slender, and the fact that I had like a balaclava on it that covered my entire face, so I didn't have a face. And I was effectively dressed up like a scarecrow, and I had a big pole. And I went out into the forest, and all these people were winding through the forest, and it's raining, and there's thunder and lightning. It was fucking brilliant if you ignored the fact that the two buildings we were using for LARP were technically scout huts. But that aside, the fantastic thing about it was at the end of this path that they're winding through this little forest towards was a little hill. And on top of the little hill was a dead tree. That's fucking creepy by itself. In my opinion, like that's something I'd notify the local council about, if I'm honest. But, like, you don't have to do it, I'll do it for free, just the tree is weird. And they were all focused on this tree, but then their, I don't know what you would call it, their game master, for example, basically caught their attention, and they're all in this big group and they're all focusing on him. So I fucking pegged it out. And the timing was amazing, because then the thunder went off, and the lightning went off, and they all looked back into the clearing, and I had hung myself on the tree, and they fucking shit themselves. And it was fantastic, but that's why misdirection is so good, because a lot of this stuff really isn't that scary if you look directly at it. It's when you're seeing it out of the corner of your eye, it's what you don't see. Your imagination is filling the blanks. And your imagination is a wanker, because your imagination will come up with far worse stuff than actually exists. There's actually an old bit of film criticism that talks about Reservoir Dogs, where, how many of you seen Reservoir Dogs? You know, there's a scene where some guy gets his ear cut off, and the whole point of it is the camera doesn't actually show his ear getting cut off, but your imagination fills it in, and that's what's so important about all of this stuff. Additionally, the other important thing is environments. Environments are incredibly good for jump scare games, because they allow the designer to control the room in which you're experiencing all this stuff, which goes for any game, right? But you can take it to massive extremes with this stuff. So things like lightning and things like, well, I mean, lighting is obvious, shadows and things like that. Instability is really interesting. The concept of instability in game design to me is incredibly fascinating in the sphere of horror, because essentially when someone is playing a game you've designed, to some degree they trust you as the designer, and they trust the environment they're in, and they trust their impression of it. But the moment a floor breaks, or the moment a door opens by itself, or the moment anything is happening where you no longer feel as comfortable with the environment as you once did, you no longer feel safe, and you no longer trust the environment you're in. And when that trust is gone, the designer has the player by the throat, because it's an incredibly powerful thing, because then the panic sets in. And their problem-solving skills decrease because they're panicked, their navigation skills decrease, they're more likely to watch stand-up comedy for an hour before they go to bed because they literally can't think about anything that isn't the little dead girl. And most importantly, it's the uncanny. The uncanny is the biggest thing to me in horror, and it's not always used in jump scare horror, but it should be, because it's the most effective. So the concept of the uncanny, I swear I love my slides, you'll get used to it, is basically, yeah, it's the art of making things look slightly wrong. It comes from a concept by Freud called Das Unheimlich, which he defines as the opposite of what is familiar. Now, you could go the opposite, but that's not particularly interesting. What I find interesting in the concept of the uncanny is going ever so slightly wrong. So, for example, and I've noted this because I read The Shining for university on a Gothic literature course, and I read that in the middle of a room full of people, and I shit myself. But the brilliant thing about it is that and the film are just full of moments where everything just feels slightly off-key. It's like listening to a beautiful concerto on a piano and then you just hit one wrong note. And in that one wrong note, you're kind of jolted out of that comforted state that you were in before. And it's like the little girls in the corridor, which would be fine, new friends to play with, except there aren't any people in that fucking hotel, so where did they come from? The hedges as well. In the book of The Shining, there's actually loads of animals carved into the hedges, and they start to move, and it's just things like that, just small touches that may not seem that much, but cumulatively, over time, you can wind people up to the point where the actual scare itself doesn't even have to be that effective, which is great for game designers, because especially indies, because when you're working to a budget, you can't afford to have like Andy Serkis come and mocap Slender Man. You'd be lucky to get Dave from down the pub to do it, let alone get the technology together. Anyway, so what I thought I'd do is I'd show you an environment that I've kind of fucked with a bit. So, I think this is quite a nice room. I'm pretty sure I just googled nice room or nice living room or something. I think it's quite nice. I don't know about you. Quite classy. It's good. It's nice. I don't really have much use for high heels in the corner, but apart from that, full-length mirror is great. Anyway, so what I thought would be interesting was if I fucked a bit with the way that the room is lit. So I did that, and immediately you can kind of tell that, of course, all the lights still work, but what's interesting, if we go back and forth, is in this room, you've got the staircase, you've got the window, you can see this entire environment, but of course, if I change it, where the fuck the bit behind the staircase go? Where are all the bits in the corners? Where do they go? How deep is that? You've now got no concept of how deep that room is. And that's incredibly scary. If I was to take it even further and make it look really weird, you'd end up with stuff like this, which is even worse, because not only does it now look unnatural, all the surfaces are completely black, which means you don't even know what shape they are. You could literally have someone be stood against a wall and you wouldn't be able to see them. And of course I could also do this, but that's just me. So, right, I've had my prick moment, I'm going to move on. So which is the most effective? Yeah, again, in my opinion, it is misdirection. I love misdirection. The best way to do it is basically to do a few things. So A, convince the player that they've got more agency than they actually do. Make them feel really powerful. Amnesia is fucking great at that. It's brilliant. You're not just pressing E and the lever moves, you grab the mouse, you move the lever, you're doing all this physical stuff, and all the time you don't realise that if some crazy monster pig thing comes flying down the corridor, you're fucked because you've got nothing to do. Outlast is very much the same. You get a lot of abilities to explore this big, open, interesting environment. And in all honesty, I think if there's one Asylum game that does it pretty well, Outlast is actually a pretty decent example. Again, no agency, all you can do is run away. So what you do is you allow them to focus on that environment. You allow them to get comfortable, you allow them to feel powerful, and that they can do anything to get themselves out of danger, but of course that's not the case. And then you've got to make with the spooky. So the concept behind it is essentially, you basically want to use basic tools. None of these are particularly new to horror, but they're all very effective because they all play on a lot of primal fears we all have. Shadows are perfect because shadows are like the definition of not quite understanding what something is, because you know something is generating a shadow, but unless you can see it directly, it's not very scary. But the misdirection plays back into that, because unless that shadow is, you know, in the corner of your eye, it's not very scary. It's when you see stuff and your mind's filling in the blanks. Additionally, static objects that can move. This is really important. Like, have you ever been in a house and just sat in a room and you're doing, I don't know, whatever, like playing World of Warcraft or something, and your door just opens? You did fuck all to that door. There's no wind in the house. There's nothing. And that small moment where you wonder where you may have been having slightly too much caffeine that month, kind of kicks in. Or if you're me, you're just a fucking coward with a big imagination. And additionally, yeah, sound effects. There's brilliant, so we were talking earlier about the concept of creepypasta, no sleep, something awful. There's a brilliant wiki called the SCP Wiki. How many people have heard of it? It's amazing. It's literally user-generated horror, and it is really like, dear God, someone give them a film contract. It's really entertaining, come up with amazing things, and one of them's called The Staircase. It's just a staircase, it goes on forever. It's really boring, up until the point where you stop walking, and you can hear footsteps that aren't yours. And that's all it is. It's just footsteps. And then you hear another pair of footsteps, and you've got no concept whether those footsteps are behind you or whether those footsteps are beneath you. There's no indication. Mainly, probably, because, you know, the sound design was shite. It might just be a happy coincidence. But what's brilliant about it is you never know whether or not you're actually going to meet it on the way down or whether it's chasing you. And it constantly it causes so much indecision, because you're stuck in a situation of, do I keep going and potentially meet someone? Do I go back? Should I be running away? And you're just ratcheting up the tension the whole time. Of course, I don't know what happens at the end of the stair game, because I do have some desire to sleep every night. But I will go back and I will find out. Also, additionally, and this is a big thing, torches. Horror games fucking love torches. And the coolest thing about using torches is, unlike normal lighting, it's effectively the concept of, I guess I would describe it as kind of like radio exploration. It's essentially that you have an area of light around you where you can perceive your environment and you understand it and you interact with it. But because it's localized to you, and because it moves with you, if I'm over here by this table, I understand the table's there, I understand there's no dead girl, blah blah blah. I move over here, I now understand this bit of the environment, but the difference is, the light's cut off, so I don't know what the fuck is over there anymore. That stuff could move, other stuff could be generated, but that has to happen after you've broken the trust of the player. Because if they trust you entirely, they're like, oh, it's just a room. You've got to kind of cross the line between making them respect the power of you as a game designer, or just thinking you're an asshole, which is kind of a thin line to walk, and you tend to get both. Altered vision is very much the same. This is lurking, this is how lurking works. I'm going to explain to you now why it's an amazing game, which is you can see nothing. The entire environment is pitch black until you make a noise. If you take a step or you throw an object, the sound waves from where that impact happens spread out across the floor and around the outlines of all the hard objects in the room. That is the smartest bit of game design I've seen in so long, because you have no concept of where anything is. What's interesting about this particular screenshot is there's a person through that window, but normally you kind of shit yourself, wouldn't you, really? Because you kind of realise that eventually you're like, well, they're not doing anything. Oh, but they've got a white outline. Oh, so that must mean they're safe. So even if there are living things in here, everything's all right. But what happens when you suddenly see someone in the distance that's got a red outline that generates their own sound? that moves way faster than you could move, that can kill you in one go, seemingly by eating your face. It's completely different concept, and it works so well when it comes to scaring people. Additionally, yes, go slide, go. So, the thing about jump scare games is they're super common. There's a question that came up here a while ago about YouTube and the popularity of jump scare games and things like that. So during the day, I'm a producer. I specialise in content marketing, viral content, social media, things like that. And what that gives me is a really good understanding of why this stuff becomes as popular as it does. And the reason for that is literally content. The reason this stuff is so fucking popular is it generates some of the best content about video games you've ever seen. Because it allows me to spend a weekend watching PewDiePie Let's Plays and then just go on like this. I could do this for hours. Horror games are amazing. But what's even better than that is YouTubers. Because there's so many things they can do with it. Scare cams are brilliant. I've watched PewDiePie shit himself so many times. He should be swimming in feces. It's fantastic. But the great thing about him is that, and others, is that you can see them in real time, you understand their reactions. Now, of course, as a viewer, that's just comedy, because we're all bastards, and we love watching people get the shit scared out of them. But what's fascinating as a designer is you can see the exact points. You can see the sine wave of the psyche of the person playing your game in real time, and that's fucking incredible. Additionally, yeah, you get all the sting movements, you get the points where I've seen PewDiePie play Oculus Rift horror games, and at the spike, he'll shove it up off his face, he'll drop the controller, and then he'll do a slow motion replay of the whole thing, which is wonderful. But yeah, again, it's the comedy, and of course, yeah, virtual reality is a big thing. Like, the Oculus Rift headsets are going to fucking define horror games. Like, that goes without saying. It is literally the most powerful, immersive bit of technology you've ever seen for game design, and it has the capability to do so much. I got beheaded in an Oculus Rift reality sim thing during the French Revolution. I was on my knees, well, not really, I was standing up because the floor is dirty. But I was on my knees inside the game, I'm looking at everyone there, and I get beheaded. And at the precise moment when my head hit the floor, I almost fucking fell over like a knobhead, because I suddenly realised that my environment wasn't how I perceived it. So immersive to the point where you lose your sense of balance. Imagine what that could do in horror games. Imagine the little dead girl if you're wearing an Oculus Rift headset. That shit is fucking insane. But yeah, it's the comedy really, I think. It's the comedy and just kind of my fascination with the fact that there's a whole horror subgenre that is literally just solely focused on huge fucking spikes in people's fear level that I think is really awesome. So yeah, that's the talk. Like a couple of questions maybe?
Kind of supplementary, not really a question. Have you played or seen Five Nights at Freddy's?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be friends with the person that made that game. Because I think we have a fundamental difference as to what constitutes a good time.
Yeah.
Because I've spent 5 nights in a row at various places and it wasn't fucking like that. The amazing thing about, for those who don't know about Five Nights at Freddy's, is essentially you're in a security room, you've got some doors you can control to shut, to protect yourself, and you've got a bunch of animatronic, like anthropomorphic animals stationed around this kind of like building. As you switch between the cameras, you notice that when you're not focused on them, they've moved, and they're getting closer and closer to your security room, which is standard horror, right? And they could have just left it at that, that would have been the brilliant bit. But what they didn't do is they don't tell you that these things eventually will stop giving a shit about you looking directly at them. They're not like the boos in Mario, because the equivalent would be literally you're playing Super Mario, you turn around, the boo hides, you turn away, the boo follows you, you turn around, boo hides, turn away, the boo follows you. This would be equivalent if you're looking directly at the boo just whipping a knife out, going fuck it, and just running in. And it's terrifying, because you're taught this incredibly intricate set of rules about how stuff works, and then like 75% of the way through it's just like, right, fuck that, defenestrates the whole thing, and then you're just kind of left to fend for yourself, and I think that's amazing. One more? Yo.
I saw you mentioned something about clowns. We didn't actually cover that. So I was just wondering if you watch American Horror Story, because then you could. This is general advice, not even a question, but it's called Freak Show, and the main villain is a terrifying clown with no jaw.
Yeah, well this is the thing, I'm sorry I didn't mention the clown thing. The reason the clown thing works so well is just the same thing. It's something that's supposed to be incredibly friendly and happy that is actually incredibly terrifying. And all it takes is just lack of trust. You're told to love clowns from a very young age. You're supposed to represent happiness and friendliness and warmth and physical comedy and stuff. And then one whips a knife out and, you know, loses his jaw. And then all of a sudden you're kind of, yeah, it's just the lack of trust thing really, I think, that works so well. And of course, there is no better scary music. I know it's such a cliche, but circus music is fucking horrendous. Because you're in a big environment. And what I don't understand actually about games based in circuses, right, is you've got all these killer clowns, killer carnies, loads of zombies. How many people have seen Zombieland?
Yeah.
Where are all the fucking animals? Why are they never used? Because I can fend off, like, someone like me, I can fend off a zombie version of like a fat bloke with a heavy kebab diet. That's fine. How are you going to fend off a zombie lion? Where's they've already learned all the lessons. They don't need to know how to learn how to eat meat and kill people and they've got that shit down. They've got a degree in that stuff. But yeah, so I love clowns, but I just do think that there's a lot more possibility out there. But yeah, so yeah, that was me. Thank you very much.
Well, just as an aside,